When she moved in next door, I didn't know I was looking into my husband's past. All I knew was that she smiled too easily, the kind of smile that carries no weight of history, no quiet ache behind the eyes. Her name was Maya. 23, maybe 24. She had this way of tucking her hair behind her ear when she talked, a gesture so small, so ordinary. Yet for some reason, it made my heart stutter. I told myself it was because she reminded me of my younger self. But that wasn't true. Not completely. The first time I saw her was on a Sunday afternoon, sunlight dripping gold across the driveway as she stood beside a moving truck. She was wearing a pale yellow dress, her hair in a low bun, and there was something so familiar about her that I couldn't stop staring. She caught my eye, smiled, and said, "Hi. You must be the neighbor." I smiled back. "Yes, I'm Elise." "Elise," she repeated softly, as if testing the sound of it. "I'm Maya. It's nice to meet you." Her voice, it was gentle, unguarded. I told her if she needed anything, sugar, a screwdriver, even just someone to talk to, my door was always open. She thanked me, her eyes warm and grateful. I didn't know then that this girl, this polite, smiling stranger, was my husband's secret child. Back then, life in our little cul-de-sac was predictable. I had a rhythm I'd built carefully over 28 years of marriage. Mornings started with the kettle's whistle and Daniel's voice echoing from the bathroom. "Elise, did you move my shaving kit again?" I never did, but I'd still laugh and call back, "Check the top drawer, the one you never open." He'd walk into the kitchen wearing that half smile that had once made me fall in love with him. We'd eat quietly, me with my tea, him with his coffee, both reading news on our phones. Comfortable silence, the kind that only long marriages earn. Our son, Ethan, had moved across the country after college. He called once a week, just to tell me he was fine. I missed him, but I was proud. Daniel and I had settled into that stage of life where the house felt too big, and the smallest noises, the clock ticking, the faucet dripping, filled the spaces where laughter used to live. Some evenings, Daniel would sit outside on the porch, watching the sky shift from orange to blue. I'd join him with a blanket and a cup of chamomile. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Or maybe, we'd just forgotten how. That's what happens, I think. Love doesn't die all at once. It fades quietly, like the last light before dusk. When Maya moved in next door, something changed in him. At first, I thought it was nothing. Just curiosity. He was friendly, that's all. But one evening, as we were watering the garden, he noticed her unloading groceries from her car. He froze for a second. His face, normally composed, unreadable, softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. I asked, "Do you know her?" He blinked, too quickly. "No." "Why? She looks familiar to you?" He shrugged, fiddling with the hose. "No. Just reminded me of someone I used to know." That night, he stayed out on the porch longer than usual. I liked Maya, though. She was the kind of neighbor anyone would want. Warm, easy to talk to, quick to offer help. She baked lemon muffins and brought some over one morning. "I made too many," she said, laughing shyly. "Thought you might like some." The muffins were good, soft, citrusy, the kind that fills the kitchen with sunshine. Daniel came home early that day, saw the plate on the counter, and asked, "Who made these?" "Maya," I said. "The new neighbor." He froze for half a heartbeat before forcing a casual tone. "Oh. She seems nice." "She is," I said. "She reminds me of Ethan, actually. Same age, same energy." He only nodded and went quiet. That night, I woke up to find his side of the bed empty. I found him in the kitchen, standing in the dark, staring out the window that faced Maya's house. I didn't ask what he was looking at. The next few weeks passed in strange rhythm. Maya and I grew close, in that gentle, neighborly way. We'd chat over the fence, share recipes, water each other's plants when one of us was away. She told me she was new to town, didn't have family nearby, and had been raised by a single mother who passed away when she was 16. Something in her eyes flickered when she said that, like she was holding back a story she wasn't ready to tell. I felt drawn to her. Maybe because I saw pieces of myself in her, young, uncertain, trying to build a life from the pieces she'd been given. Daniel, though, he grew quieter. He'd make excuses not to join me for dinner on the porch if Maya was outside. Sometimes he'd come home late, saying he had to handle extra paperwork for his business. But his clothes smelled faintly of perfume, not the usual metallan oil scent that clung to him after work. I tried not to think too much. After nearly 30 years of marriage, you learn which questions are better left unasked. But one afternoon, as I was trimming the rose bushes, I noticed Daniel standing near the fence, talking to Maya. His tone was soft, intimate, not flirty, exactly, but familiar. She was smiling, that same tender smile she'd given me when we first met. Then he said something that made her freeze. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I saw her hand go to her chest, and the color drain from her face. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were filled with something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe. Or sorrow. She turned and walked quickly back into her house. Daniel stood there for a long time, staring after her. And that's when the first real suspicion crept in, the kind that doesn't scream, but whispers. The kind that keeps you awake at night. Later that evening, I asked him casually, "How was your day?" He said, "Fine." "Talk to anyone interesting?" He looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said. "Just making conversation." He sighed. "Elise, you're imagining things." I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. But sometimes, the truth hides in the spaces between words, in the way someone avoids your eyes, or how their hand trembles just enough when they reach for their glass. That night, as I lay beside him, I realized something had cracked open inside me. It was small, but it was there, a fracture in the trust I'd spent nearly 3 decades building. And deep down, I think I already knew. The next morning, the air felt different, heavier somehow, the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee. He hadn't shaved, which was unlike him. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, and the leftover muffins Maya had given us. He didn't touch them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You've been spending a lot of time with the girl next door." I paused, spatula midair. "Her name's Maya. She's new in town." "I'm just being kind." He nodded, but there was a tension behind his jaw. "Just be careful. Not everyone's who they say they are." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He stood, kissed my forehead too quickly, and said, "Forget it." Then he left. I watched him walk out the door, the sun glinting off his car as it pulled away. My gut twisted, that instinct women have when something is wrong, even if you can't name it yet. That afternoon, I was out front trimming the hedge when Maya came over. She looked pale, her eyes a little puffy, like she hadn't slept. "Elise," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." I motioned for her to sit on the porch steps beside me. She hesitated, glancing toward my house, or maybe the window where Daniel sometimes stood. "Never mind. It's silly." "No," I said gently. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me." She gave a small, sad smile. "You remind me of my mother. She was like that too, always listening." I smiled. "Then I'll take that as a compliment." She nodded, biting her lip. "It's just, I met someone recently, older than me. I didn't know how to feel about it. He's kind, but distant. Sometimes I think he wants to say something, but he stops himself." A quiet chill crawled up my neck. "What's his name?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. She blinked. "Oh, it's not serious, really. Just someone who knew my mother a long time ago." My pulse quickened. "What was your mother's name?" She hesitated, too long. Then softly, "Claire." My hands froze around the pruning shears. Claire. The name rang in my ears like an echo from another lifetime. Claire was a name I hadn't spoken in almost 30 years. When Daniel and I first got married, he worked late nights. There was always a woman at his office, the secretary who laughed too loudly, touched his arm too often. Her name was Claire. I'd asked about her once. He'd brushed it off with a chuckle, saying, "She's just the office chatterbox. Don't worry." But one night, he came home smelling like a perfume, that sharp floral scent that lingers long after the person is gone. I confronted him, and he swore it was nothing. He even brought home flowers the next day, as if petals could erase suspicion. A month later, she quit the job, and we never spoke of her again. Until now. I looked at Maya, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Claire. That's a lovely name. What was she like? Maya smiled faintly. She was complicated. Beautiful, I think. But sad. She used to say love makes people foolish. My throat tightened. Do you know your father? I asked quietly. She shook her head. No. Mom never told me who he was. Said it didn't matter, that he had his own life. I forced a smile. I see. Inside, my heartbeat was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. That night, after she went home, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the darkened window between our houses. The lights in her living room flickered on, a warm, golden glow. And then I saw it. Daniel, standing inside her house. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But no, there he was, standing near her couch, his posture stiff, his face pale. Maya stood opposite him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He reached out a hand, but she shook her head sharply. Then she turned away. He left moments later, glancing toward our house before disappearing into the night. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt hollow. I pressed a hand to the counter to steady myself. The next morning, I confronted him. Were you at Maya's house last night? He froze, coffee mug halfway to his lips. What? Don't lie to me, Daniel. I saw you. His face went still, that practiced blank expression he wore whenever he didn't want to show emotion. She's been having trouble with her plumbing, he said finally. I went over to help. At 10 o'clock at night. He slammed the mug down, the sound shattering the quiet. Elise, for God's sake, I'm a plumber. It's not unusual. I stared at him. Is that really what you're going with? He glared at me, then sighed, rubbing his temples. You're overthinking. She's just a kid. I wanted to believe him. But my instincts screamed otherwise. Later that day, I found a small box tucked under the couch. Daniel's handwriting on the lid. Inside were old photographs, brittle with age. One photo stopped me cold. Daniel, younger by decades, standing beside a woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Claire. Her hand rested gently on his arm. She was pregnant. Behind them, a calendar on the wall read 1999. The same year Daniel and I had just bought our first home. The same year Maya would have been conceived. My hands shook so hard the photos slipped from my fingers. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the scattered proof of everything I'd built my life on, crumbling. When Daniel came home that night, I was waiting for him. I didn't shout. Didn't cry. I just placed the photograph on the table. He looked at it, and for the first time in years, I saw real fear in his eyes. Daniel, I whispered. Who is she? He swallowed hard. Elise, please. Tell me the truth. He sat down slowly, his face pale. Her name was Claire. I made a mistake. A long time ago. I said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked louder than his words. He continued, voice cracking. It was before Ethan was born. I thought it was just an affair. She got pregnant. I didn't know until later. Until after she left town. And you never told me? He shook his head. I couldn't. I thought. It was over. My voice broke. Over. She's next door, Daniel. That girl, Maya, she's yours, isn't she? He closed his eyes. That silence was the confirmation I'd feared. The room spun. My knees gave out, and I sank into the chair. 30 years of marriage, every laugh, every fight, every quiet dinner, suddenly felt like a lie wrapped in comfort. He reached for me, whispering, "I'm sorry." I pulled away. "No, Daniel. You don't get to be sorry. Not for this." My voice was shaking, but there was something cold beneath it, something I didn't recognize in myself. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased from a part of his life I never even knew existed. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, the sound of the ceiling fan clicking with each slow turn. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs, or at least pretended to. I could hear him shift every so often, as though restless, as though guilt had weight and he couldn't get comfortable carrying it. I stared up at the ceiling, the moonlight cutting thin lines across the room, and thought about all the little moments that suddenly made sense. The years when he'd come home quieter than usual. The business trips that never matched his company's schedule. The envelopes that arrived once a year, always the same handwriting, always tucked away before I could ask. I'd mistaken his silence for peace, his distance for exhaustion. But maybe it had always been shame. In the morning, I found him outside, sitting on the porch steps with his head in his hands. "Does she know?" I asked quietly. He looked up, eyes red. "She found me." "How?" He sighed. "She sent a letter a few months ago. Said her mother had passed away. She'd found my name in some old papers. So you just, decided to keep it from me?" His voice cracked. "Elise, I didn't know how. I thought if I could just meet her, help her settle down, maybe." "Maybe what?" I snapped. "You could have 2 lives again." He flinched. I shook my head, turning away from him. "I spent half my life defending you, Daniel. Every time someone said you were distant, I said you were just quiet. Every time I felt something off, I told myself I was imagining it." I looked back at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for nearly 3 decades, and for the first time, I didn't recognize him. "You made me a fool in my own home." He stood, his voice breaking. "Elise, she's my daughter. I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan it. But you chose it," I whispered. "Every day you kept it from me, you chose her over us." The days that followed were a blur of numb routines. He went to work. I cooked, cleaned, taught my art classes. But everything felt hollow, as if the walls themselves knew something had shattered inside them. And then there was Maya. I couldn't look at her without seeing the truth written all over her face. Daniel's eyes, his chin, the same small crease near the mouth when they smiled. She waved one morning from her porch, and I managed a polite smile. But inside, a quiet storm was brewing. A week later, Maya came to my door again. She looked nervous, her fingers twisting around the strap of her purse. "Elise," she began softly, "I think I need to explain something." I stepped aside. "Come in." She sat at the kitchen table, eyes darting to the window as though afraid he might appear. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I didn't even know who you were at first. I only wanted to meet him once. I thought it might give me closure." My throat tightened. "Closure?" She nodded. "My mom never told me much. Only that he was married. That she didn't want to ruin his life. But when she got sick, she made me promise I'd find him, just to know if he was still alive." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't know he'd kept it a secret from you." "I swear I didn't." Her voice trembled, so young, so fragile. And in that moment, against all reason, I felt pity. Because she didn't choose this either. I took a slow breath. "You didn't ruin my marriage, Maya. He did that himself." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I think he's trying to make it right now. But I told him he can't fix 30 years of lies." Her honesty stung, but it was also strangely comforting. She didn't make excuses for him. When she stood to leave, I touched her arm. You're not to blame. But you need to give me space, all right? She nodded quickly. Of course. I will. That evening, Daniel came home early. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. She came to see you, he said quietly. Yes, I replied, keeping my back to him as I washed the dishes. What did she say? That she didn't mean to hurt me. That you've been talking to her for months. He sighed, rubbing his face. I didn't mean for it to go this way. I thought if I could just. I cut him off. Stop saying that, Daniel. You thought you could control it. That you could balance the lie and the truth until one of them stopped mattering. He didn't reply. The only sound was the steady clink of plates, the running water, the hum of a house pretending to be normal. That night, I found him in his office, the one I rarely entered. Papers covered the desk. And there, beside an old photo of Ethan, was another framed picture. Maya, smiling shyly, her hair in a loose braid. Something inside me snapped. I picked up the frame, turned it face down. He looked up, startled. Elise. I held up a hand. I don't want to see it. She's my daughter, he said quietly. Whether you like it or not. I looked at him, really looked. The man I once loved with everything I had. Then go be her father. But don't expect me to stand beside you while you pretend this family was built on anything real. I left the room before he could answer. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom for the first time in my life. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood gossip began to stir. People noticed Daniel spending time at Maya's house, fixing her porch light, mowing her lawn, sometimes even eating dinner with her. One evening, Mrs. Jacobs from across the street called. Elise, dear. I don't mean to pry, but is everything all right? I've seen Daniel next door quite a bit. I closed my eyes, forcing a smile into my voice. He's helping out. She's family. Family, she repeated, her tone curious. Yes, I said softly. Apparently. When I hung up, I realized that was the first time I'd said it out loud, that Maya was family. But it didn't feel like a truth I'd accepted. It felt like one I was learning to survive. That night, as I stood by the window, I watched them again. Daniel and Maya on her porch, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. She looked so at ease. He looked alive in a way he hadn't in years. And I, standing in the darkness of my kitchen, felt like the ghost in my own marriage. I pressed a hand to the window pane, the glass cool against my skin. How do you mourn something that isn't dead, only replaced? The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing. The good kind, the one Daniel always made on Sundays. For a second, I almost forgot everything. Almost. When I walked into the kitchen, he was standing there in his work shirt, 2 mugs on the counter. Morning, he said quietly. I nodded, cautious. Morning. He pushed 1 mug toward me. Thought you might need it. I stared at the steam rising between us. You think coffee's going to fix 30 years of deceit? His shoulders sagged. No. But I don't know how else to start. Something in his voice caught me off guard. Not guilt, not apology, but exhaustion. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Maybe it was the weight of truth finally catching up. I sat down, more out of habit than forgiveness. Start with honesty, Daniel. For once. He leaned against the counter, gripping the edge like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I met her mother before you and I married, he said. It was brief. I didn't know she was pregnant when we lost touch. I found out years later, but by then, we had Ethan. We had a life. I told myself it was too late to go back. His words landed like stones in a still pond. So you built a new life, I said. And buried the old one. He nodded, eyes wet. I thought I was protecting you. I gave a small, bitter laugh. You were protecting yourself. You let me build our marriage on a foundation of lies, Daniel. He didn't argue. Maybe he finally knew better. That day, I went for a long walk around the lake. The air was crisp, the leaves beginning to turn. I'd always believed time made people softer, more forgiving, more understanding. But I realized that morning, it doesn't. It just layers you with silence until the truth cracks it open. When I returned home, there was a small envelope in the mailbox. No name, no stamp, just placed there. Inside was a note, written in a careful, slightly unsure hand. Mrs. Bennet, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to know my father. I hope one day, you can see that I wasn't trying to take him from you. Maya. I stood there on the porch, the paper trembling in my hands. I don't know what it was, guilt, grief, or some strange maternal instinct, but I suddenly wanted to see her. Not as the girl who broke my life open, but as the one who'd been born from someone else's heartbreak. That afternoon, I walked next door. She opened the door almost immediately, surprise flashing across her face. Mrs. Bennet. I got your note, I said. Can we talk? She stepped aside quickly, her house warm and full of little signs of youth. Half-read books, candles, soft music playing somewhere in the background. I don't know how to say this, I began. But I believe you. You didn't mean for this to happen. Her eyes filled again. I didn't. He's been kind to me. I think he's trying in his way. I nodded slowly. That's what he does. He tries when it's already too late. We sat across from each other, two women tied to the same man in ways neither of us had chosen. After a long silence, she whispered, Do you hate me? I swallowed. No. I don't hate you, Maya. I hate the choices that made this your burden. Her lip trembled. I didn't ask to be anyone's secret. That line hit me like a slap. I closed my eyes, feeling tears sting. No, you didn't. That evening, Daniel came home to find me sitting on the porch again. I spoke to her, I said before he could even ask. He stopped mid-step. You did. She's a good girl, Daniel. She didn't deserve this. Neither did I. He looked down. I know. And I don't know what that means for us. He took a deep breath. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said quietly. Because I don't have it in me yet. He nodded, standing there in silence. For once, he didn't try to fix it. Maybe he finally realized that some things aren't meant to be patched, they're meant to be learned from. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing small shifts. Maya began waving again, cautiously at first. Sometimes she'd bring over baked goods from the farmer's market, leaving them on my porch like peace offerings. And Daniel, he started coming home earlier, sitting in silence with me at dinner. Not forcing words, just presence. I found myself softening, not out of love, but out of a tired kind of acceptance. One night, he broke the quiet. I'm thinking of selling the business, he said. Why? I want to step back. Spend more time. With both of you. In different ways. I didn't respond. But something about the way he said both of you told me he finally saw the cost of everything he'd built. A few days later, I visited my art class at the community center. I hadn't painted in months. My hands felt clumsy, my thoughts scattered. When I dipped the brush into the paint, I found myself drawing two houses side by side. One in shadow, one full of light. It wasn't about envy or pain. It was about learning that life, even in its cruelest moments, keeps moving. Color bleeding into color, no matter how you try to keep them apart. That night, when I returned home, Daniel was on the porch again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Maya sat beside him, showing him something on her phone. Maybe a picture, maybe a memory. They were laughing. When they noticed me, they both fell silent. Hi, Mrs. Bennet, Maya said softly. I hesitated, then nodded. Hi, Maya. Daniel looked at me, uncertain. I walked past them, but before stepping inside, I turned back. It's all right. Stay. Talk. For the first time, I meant it. Because forgiveness isn't a single act, it's a slow surrender. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to begin. But healing has its own way of testing you. A week later, something happened that forced all our quiet progress back into chaos. That morning, I was hanging laundry in the backyard when I heard a sharp knock at Maya's door. I turned and saw Ethan, our son, standing on her porch. He had come home unannounced. And he was about to learn everything. Mom. Ethan's voice carried across the fence before I even had time to hide my reaction. He was taller than I remembered, broader, older, with that same mix of Daniel's jawline and my eyes. I froze, the basket of damp laundry still in my hands. Ethan. I managed, forcing a smile that felt too tight. You didn't tell me you were coming. He grinned, the easy, boyish kind. Wanted to surprise you. I've got a few days off work. Thought I'd come see my old folks. Then he turned toward Maya's door. Met your new neighbor on my way in. She seems nice. My throat went dry. Maya appeared then, stepping out, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked nervous. Her eyes darted from me to him, then back again. Hi again, she said softly. Hey. Ethan replied, friendly as ever. Didn't realize you two already knew each other. The silence that followed stretched thin. Daniel came out from the garage then, as if summoned by tension. Ethan, he said, voice tight. You're early. Ethan's smile faltered. Yeah. Is everything okay? I wanted to speak, to say yes, to keep that fragile sense of peace a few seconds longer. But my voice wouldn't come. Instead, Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, eyes on the ground. Let's go inside, son. We need to talk. We gathered around the kitchen table, the same table that had held birthday cakes, family dinners, and the quiet, ordinary moments of our life. Ethan sat across from us, confusion creasing his brow. Okay, he said. You're scaring me a little. What's going on? Daniel looked at me. He wanted me to start. But no, not this time. He had to be the one. Tell him, I said quietly. He hesitated, jaw tightening. Then, with a breath that sounded like it hurt, he said, Ethan, there's something I should have told you years ago. You have a sister. The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Ethan frowned. A what? Daniel swallowed. A daughter. From before you were born. The color drained from Ethan's face. You're joking. I wish I were, Daniel said softly. Ethan looked between us. And you knew. I shook my head, feeling tears rise again. Not until recently. She moved in next door, Ethan. He turned toward the window, the one that looked straight out onto Maya's house. Her, he whispered. Daniel nodded. Ethan pushed back from the table so hard the chair screeched across the floor. You both kept this from me? How long have you known? A few weeks, I said. I found out the same way you're finding out now. I just needed time to process. Time. His voice cracked. You've had time? You mean you just sat here having dinner while I didn't even know I had a sister? Daniel tried to reach for him. Ethan, I didn't want to. Don't, Ethan snapped, standing. You don't get to tell me what you wanted. You lied to Mom. You lied to me. You lied to her. For the first time, I saw anger in my son's eyes. Not the frustrated kind from teenage years, but deep, adult anger. The kind that comes from betrayal. He turned to me, his expression breaking. Mom, how are you even still here? I swallowed hard. Because walking away doesn't undo the truth. It only leaves it unfinished. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight, then stormed out. The slam of the front door echoed through the house. I found him later that evening, sitting on the curb outside, head in his hands. The streetlights painted soft halos on the pavement, and crickets filled the silence. I sat beside him, careful not to touch him too soon. You okay? I asked softly. He gave a humorless laugh. Do I look okay? No, I admitted. He sighed, voice quieter now. She's nice, you know. Maya. When I met her earlier, she reminded me of you, actually. She's got that same calm way of talking. I didn't know what to say. My heart ached with something I couldn't name. Pride, pain, love, maybe all at once. He looked up at me. So what now? You're just neighbors? Family. How does that even work? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know none of this is her fault. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that. We sat there a while longer, watching the quiet row of houses that somehow all felt different now. Finally, he said, You're stronger than I thought, Mom. I smiled faintly. No, Ethan. I just ran out of ways to break. The next morning, there was a knock at the door again. Maya stood there, hesitant, with a small box in her hands. Hi, she said. I baked something. For everyone. Ethan came up behind me. He froze when he saw her. She swallowed nervously. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I can move if it's easier for you all. Ethan shook his head. No, don't. She blinked. Really? He glanced at me, then back at her. None of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be in this story. Her eyes softened. Thank you. I stepped aside. Come in, Maya. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside, into the home that, for so long, had been built on half-truths and quiet love. As she placed the box on the table, her hands trembled slightly. Ethan helped her unwrap it, Daniel lingering awkwardly near the hallway. For a moment, the scene looked almost ordinary, like any family trying to find its rhythm. But underneath the small talk and soft laughter, I could feel the cracks, sharp, deep, still healing. And yet, for the first time in months, I didn't feel anger. Just a strange, fragile peace. Because maybe, in the end, we weren't meant to go back to the way things were. Maybe we were meant to build something new, out of the truth this time. Still, the world has a cruel sense of timing. 2 days later, Daniel collapsed in his workshop. By the time we got to the hospital, the doctors said it was his heart. Years of stress, the weight of guilt, maybe both. He survived, but barely. And lying there in that bed, pale and trembling, he whispered, Take care of her, both of you. I took his hand, and for once, I didn't look away. Because after everything, the lies, the secrets, the hurt, I realized that love doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It softens. It forgives, even when it shouldn't. Hospitals have their own kind of silence. Not the comforting kind you find at night in your own home, but a hollow one, like the walls are waiting for bad news. Daniel stayed there for nearly a week. Each morning, I brought him breakfast in small containers, even though he barely touched them. Maya visited too, always in the afternoons, when the light from the window made the room feel less like a cage. She'd bring flowers, small yellow ones she said reminded her of her childhood yard. Sometimes she'd just sit quietly, reading aloud from a magazine. Ethan started coming after work, too, though he never stayed long. We were all there, orbiting around the same man, the same truth, trying to make sense of what it had done to us. One afternoon, as I sat beside his bed, Daniel looked at me, his voice weak. Do you hate me? The question came out like a confession. I stared at him for a long moment. His hand was thinner now, veins more visible, the gold band around his finger dulled by years of wear. I did, I said finally. For a while, I hated you so much it scared me. He closed his eyes. I deserve that. But, I continued, my voice softer, I realized something. Hate takes more from me than you. It eats you from the inside, Daniel. I don't want to live that way. When I said it, I didn't feel like I was forgiving him for what he'd done. I was forgiving myself, for holding on so tightly to the hurt that I couldn't breathe anymore. After he was discharged, we brought him home. The house felt different, not as heavy. Maybe it was because everything was finally out in the open. There were no more locked drawers, no half-truths left unspoken. Maya came by every day to help. She'd cook light meals, do the dishes, sometimes sit by Daniel's side while he napped. Ethan started joining her, slowly getting used to the idea that he had a sister. I'd watch them from the kitchen window, the three of them talking, laughing sometimes, awkwardly at first, then more easily as days went on. There was one afternoon that stayed with me. They were in the garden, pulling weeds from the flower beds. Daniel's hand shook, but Maya held it steady, guiding him. When he looked up at her, I saw something I hadn't seen in him for a long time. Peace. It wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about reconciliation. The kind that doesn't need words, only presence. Weeks turned into months. Daniel grew weaker, but quieter too. The kind of quiet that comes when someone has made peace with their story. One night, while I was folding laundry, he called out from the living room. "Come sit with me," he said. I sat beside him on the couch. The TV flickered in the background, showing some old western we'd seen 100 times. He reached for my hand. "You stayed." I looked at him. "I did." "Why?" I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, "Because you were still the man I built a life with. Because Ethan needed a father. Because walking away wouldn't erase the years that were real." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "You've always been stronger than me." I smiled faintly. "No. I just learned how to stand after falling too many times." He chuckled weakly. "You always did have a way with words." We sat there a while longer, his hand warm in mine, until he drifted off to sleep. Daniel passed quietly 3 months later. The doctors said his heart finally gave out. I think it was more than that. I think it just stopped carrying the weight of all those years. The funeral was small, simple. Maya stood beside me, tears streaming down her face, her hand gripping mine. Ethan spoke a few words, about forgiveness, about family, about second chances. When it was over, I watched them both standing there, side by side, looking down at the grave. And in that moment, I realized that my family wasn't broken. It had just changed shape. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy what we have. It just reveals what was already fragile. Afterward, Maya came to see me often. She'd bring groceries, help with chores, sometimes just sit and talk. She started calling me Margaret instead of Mrs. Bennett. I didn't correct her. One day as we sat on the porch, she said, "You know, I used to imagine what my father was like. I never thought I'd find out this way." I nodded. Life rarely gives us the version we imagine. She smiled. "I think he loved you deeply, even if he didn't know how to show it right." I looked out at the street, at the soft light of the evening settling on the houses. "Maybe that's the lesson," I said quietly. "Love isn't about never failing. It's about what you do after you fail." She reached over, squeezed my hand. "I think he'd be proud of you." I smiled. "Then maybe, somewhere, he finally is." Months later, when spring came again, I decided to reopen my art class. On the first day back, I stood before a canvas and found myself painting something different this time. Not 2 houses, not 2 lives divided, but one long road lined with small, connected homes. Because that's what we were now. Connected, not perfect, not whole, but together in some strange human way. Maya started helping me at the center, volunteering with the younger students. She was good with them, patient, kind, and endlessly curious. Sometimes, when I watched her teaching, I saw flashes of Daniel in her smile. It didn't hurt anymore. It just reminded me that even mistakes can leave behind something good. I often think back to that first day she moved in next door, the way I felt something tighten in my chest without knowing why. Maybe my heart already knew the truth before my mind caught up. Maybe it was preparing me, gently, for the lesson I'd spend the next year learning. That forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a home you build for yourself when there's nowhere else to go. You know, sometimes I sit on that same porch where it all began, watching the light spill across the fence between my house and Maya's, and I think about how strange life can be. We spend so many years believing we know the people we love. We memorize their habits, their smiles, their quiet moods. We think that means we know their hearts. But hearts have corners even love can't reach. I used to think betrayal was the end of everything. That once a truth like that came out, there was no way forward, no repairing, no forgiveness. But standing here now, after all that's happened, I've learned that sometimes the end of one truth is just the beginning of another. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It did. There were nights when I sat alone in that dark kitchen, staring at the walls that had heard every argument, every silence. Nights when I wanted to pack a bag and disappear. But something kept me there, not pride, not fear, but a quiet hope that maybe we could all learn to be honest this time. And we did, in our own imperfect way. Maya still lives next door. Sometimes, on Sunday mornings, she brings me fresh bread she bakes herself. Ethan drops by with his kids, and the house fills with laughter again. Every now and then, I catch Maya looking at the old photo of Daniel and me on the mantel. She doesn't say anything, and neither do I. We just share a look that says, we made it through. Life doesn't always give you clean endings. Sometimes it just gives you softer beginnings. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the wound never happened. It means you stop letting it define the rest of your life. Because no matter what anyone tells you, peace isn't found in revenge or bitterness. It's found in the quiet decision to keep your heart open, even after it's been broken. So if you've ever discovered a truth that shattered you, ask yourself this. Will you build walls to keep the pain out? Or will you build bridges to let healing in? Tell me, my dears, would you have stayed? Would you have opened your door to the past like I did? I'll be here, listening. This is Auntie May, and thank you for sharing your evening with me.